Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Aaron Monson. I'm the CMO of OfficeGenie. If you haven't heard of us before, that's the reason that we're actually making this video. Today, we're going to be giving you a top-down look of everything that is involved with this company and giving you a breakdown of why this is an essential tool, why we keep pursuing creating this technology, and really where we're going with it here in the future. With me right now is the CEO and founder and creator and man of many hats, of many talents, Hayden Smith. He has started this company from the ground up, programmed almost every line of code with the help of a couple people. And he's going to give us a rundown from his experience and perspective of why he started this company to begin with, how we got involved with one another, and where things are going here in the future. And Hayden, why don't you go ahead and reintroduce yourself and break it down for us?
As he said, my name's Hayden Smith. I'm the CEO and founder of OfficeGenie. And we started it roughly about a year ago. Aaron, Mike, and Zane got involved around 8 months ago or so. It's definitely been a journey since about a year ago up until now. But really, the reason that I started OfficeGenie was out of a necessity at my previous job. So I was a data analyst at a telecommunications company, and it was my first real kind of adult job in college. And I was really excited to start. I did the weeks and weeks of training that was required for any position. But my first day on the job, I quickly realized that I was spending hours every day just asking other people how to do things the company way. The training manuals were super long and arduous, hundreds, if not thousands of pages long, and didn't really provide a lot of clarification as to how to do things correctly. And so I was bothering other people. I was losing time on the job. And even though I had the technical skills to do things, I certainly was a lot less productive than I would have liked to be. So out of that, I created OfficeGenie, or at least the very first iteration of OfficeGenie, by uploading all of those pieces of internal documentation and creating a personal knowledge base that I was able to use and chat with. I let my team use it. They really liked it and quickly realized that this could be applicable to a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses have a lot of information, but it's not really organized, not accessible. And there's a lot of people that were in similar positions like myself, even people that have been around for multiple years that were struggling with the same thing. Out of that, OfficeGenie was born. And it's certainly progressed over the past year. We've added quite a few features and gone in a more generalized direction. The most kind of recent addition of which being a more agent based approach, which allows for work to actually be done on behalf of the end user. But that's what OfficeGenie was born out of, where it's at now. And the goal for the future is to continue allowing users to get more done just with verbal commands, text commands. Natural language processing is proven to be the new user interface over the past few years, and we expect that pattern is going to continue. And so we are hoping to develop products and technologies that kind of leverage that new paradigm shift and provide value.
That's a pretty good overview of what we're doing. But what we're going to do is go through some of the more intricate aspects of it, starting back at the beginning. Uh, in the beginning of this company, when Hayden and I had met, and Hayden, correct me if I'm wrong, we had talked about some of the needs that I had in my business. We started to find out pretty quickly that the applicability was almost industry agnostic. Pretty much anybody in any industry could utilize this technology. And why, from your experience, Hayden, do you think that companies are looking to implement natural language processing into their businesses specifically?
Yeah, there's two answers. The primary answer is that there's a lot of hype around it right now. And so every business is looking for a way to almost shoehorn AI into their business, sometimes for the sake of implementing AI. If you're going to be leveraging these technologies, you want to make sure it's actually adding value to your business. And so one of the common pitfalls businesses run into is they use things like ChatGPT, they use things like Claude, but because those large language models have no ground truth to really base their responses on, a lot of the general purpose information that these tools are feeding them isn't really applicable to how their business should operate. And so it's really easy to get disillusioned with a lot of the technology, even though could be leveraged to actually benefit their business. And so there's a lot of small businesses, a lot of small business owners that are seeing the value that AI can provide. But up until recently, when it's been more commoditized, it's been ambiguous and difficult to see exactly how things could be applied to their business. And that's why we went the industry agnostic kind of generalized approach where you wouldn't need to hire a consulting agency to come and build something for you for multiple months before you can actually decrease overhead costs or see some marginal productivity increases.
See, that's a good point that you made specifically when talking about large language model applications. And I think that there's an illusion around artificial intelligence right now where everyone looks at it as a black box. They see the letters AI and they assume that all technology that's being developed right now is artificial intelligence. But can you explain a little bit of the differences between, say, large language models, vision models, audio models, music models? Break it down in those senses and explain the difference between what we are doing versus, say, like a vision model specified company.
Any new model is going to be very different in architecture compared to the models of the past. So, a good example of that might be IBM Watson, or going back even further, Deep Blue, whenever it finally beat the world champion chess player. And so, the way in which AI has been used has definitely been progressing. And algorithmically speaking, the techniques for a lot of these modern AI models have been around since the 1950s, 1960s. But it wasn't until recently that the hardware to facilitate those types of systems really caught up. And that's why NVIDIA, for example, has been doing very well in the stock market recently because now the compute power is highly necessary. And so a lot of these models, should they be large language models or image diffusion models like Midjourney, DALL-E 3, or even OpenAI's Sora, is that they take in one modality of input, whether that's text, audio, what have you, and they output something else through a series of weights and parameters. There's a lot of cool nerd math stuff involved in the middle there, but generally speaking, there's just a large corpus of training data, or essentially examples, and not dissimilar to how humans would learn between taking an input and getting a desired output. These systems can do something that's very similar to that. And after a sufficient amount of training, they can replicate those patterns between what you put in and what you actually desire to get out. It's important to note that we're seeing a trend of multimodality within these models. So I'll use OpenAI as an example. They are now releasing multimodal models, meaning that you can't just interact with the model with text, but also voice and also images as input as well. And so that's another trend we see as being something that's going to continue into the future. And we're excited to see exactly how we can leverage that technology for our own product.
See, that's cool to think of too, is how far the technology has come, especially over the past 50 to 60 years. And looking at how things are going into the future, it's important to understand the similarities and the importance of what this technology does. You talked a bit about the multimodality, and specifically, people are throwing around buzzwords such as neural network and vector database and things like that. And could you explain a little bit about how a neural network works? And I've heard it referred to almost like a brain, like a human brain. Could you explain
Mm.
why these technologies are taking in inputs and being able to change them and output them almost like human experiences?
Yeah, and a lot of how humans learn is very similar, as I said, to how machine learning models work as well. And if you were to imagine training for a sport or really trying to get good at anything, the goal is to complete an action or to do something and to achieve a desired output. And not unlike how humans learn and get better over time, these new systems need that as well. A stark contrast to more traditional automation of the past is that traditional automation means would require hard coding quite literally every decision that a computer system would be able to make. So imagine if you were making a chess bot, you would say, if a pawn goes here, you have XYZ options and you should move your knight or bishop or what have you. But what these neural networks and these deep neural networks are able to do is they're able to actually analyze just the state of a game and perceive where they ought to be and then fill in the blanks intermittently with that, again, large corpus of training data. And so, taking it back to the example of you getting better at something, if you're trying to get better at basketball, of course, you could sit down with a textbook and learn, okay, this is exactly what I need to do to take the perfect shot. Or you could spend an afternoon with a basketball and a hoop, just getting better and better over time. And as you make more and more shots, you realize, okay, I need to adjust left, adjust right. That would be analogous to the training phase of the model, whenever it's actually using that data to establish that pattern recognition and learn what it needs to do. And once training is done, then it's able to take those more abstract concepts, something as abstract as natural language, for example, and turn those inputs into those desired outputs.
I saw a
Yep.
joke on the internet about this in a meme where it just was talking about programming artificial intelligence, and it just had a bunch of if statements until it came out to the final
Yep.
state. And that's like a real good way to understand artificial intelligence is it's not that different to the way the human brains works. It's if you're planning a trip and you're going on vacation and you're like, I need to get a hotel, but if I call this hotel, it may be booked. So if that happens, I need to call this hotel. And then eventually you're able to find a place to sleep that night. And that's like the best way that I would be able to explain it to somebody else is that these systems do that, but on a massive scale and in an instant. And depending on how much information that you put into that system is almost like your own internal memory bank of understanding how to plan a process either on the job or dealing with a friend or dealing with a family member. Say your child, the more they do over time, really the parent is the only one to really understand their kid better than anybody. But how would you translate that to somebody else? The retrieval augmented generation is almost like the parent child relationship where you know your child better than anybody else, all their allergies, all their behaviors, everything that they've ever said and done. And that's similar to on the job where you know your business better than anybody else. And you have to bring in new hires. You have to sell the product to customers. You have to service the products and maintain them. But how do you train people on that? Hayden, if you'd like to highlight what that system is and why that's the core of our system.
The biggest time saver for me when I was starting that new job was being able to ask people that actually had gone through it. It's no surprise that if you go on to ChatGPT and ask a question specific to your business, it's going to have no idea what to do. And so retrieval augmented generation has been proposed as a solution for being able to ground large language models in domain specific knowledge. And so, what the augmented generation means is by the time you send your message into the system, it's going to pull out the relevant information to deliver an accurate result to you. By the time the large language model actually sees your question, it also gets fed the relevant context. And the way that's done is all of your data, whether that be text data, image data, or otherwise, is converted into numbers, a semantic kind of representation of whatever data chunk you've currently fed into the system. And because computers tend to be really good with numbers, you can very quickly group together contextually relevant pieces of information. So whenever you send that question in, that question also gets converted into that same number representation. And so you can imagine it like clusters of dots. If you have this knowledge base and clusters of dots, and there's a group over here that talks about training manuals, and there's a group over here that talks about PTO. If you were to take that question you have and plop it into that same dot cluster, the relevant context is going to be right there in the surrounding dots. And so the system can pull those clusters of dots back out and let it go into the large language model. And so, really, at that time, the large language model is just interpolating the answer in a way that makes sense to you. So it's not just going to give you the chunk of data that's right there from that training manual or that SOP document. It's going to apply it a degree of nuance to your current situation and then use that to then deliver more accurate results.
See, the way that you explain how almost placing it in a three-dimensional space, because the way that I would use that as a comparison and tell me if I'm wrong on this is say, for example, if you're familiar with, say, a certain ingredient in a food and it has a very distinctive smell, let's just label one like paprika, and you happen to order a new dish at a restaurant you've never been to before, and you may not have read the menu exactly word for word what was in there, but you eat it and then all of a sudden either the flavor or the smell triggers some sort of a memory being like, okay, this refers to paprika, which was used in this certain type of food group or this restaurant. And that's an idea that I look at with the retrieval augmented generation is you ask a certain type of question and the contextual relevance will say, hey, this is relative to these certain types of terms in that space. And then you can almost, it automatically, like the brain of the system that's programmed, the vector database can basically pull it to the most relevant context, similar to a smell of a certain type of food item.
Absolutely. So, if you were to compare the manual way of getting contextually relevant information to use something like a RAG based system, It would be like walking into a library, knowing the topic that you want to search, but then you have to go up and down every aisle, thumbing through every single book. Once you found the book, then you have to read through everything and find the correct page. But because we are able to essentially represent these high level kind of abstract concepts as numbers, we can apply mathematical formulas to it to get that information super quick. And so a RAG system in the library example would be analogous to a really convenient librarian that the moment you walk into the library and say, I need to know stuff about XYZ, the librarian goes directly to the book, flips open to the page, and points you exactly where you need to be. And so, because we're able to do that, it's significantly faster finding that relevant information than doing those manual searches. And really, that's at the backbone of OfficeGenie's AI knowledge base component of the software.
And so now that we've talked about like how the system functions, we can talk about the more agentic functionality, the automation side of things, really the way that how our kind of future is looking with the technology, what it's currently at, and how these systems are playing a role in that search process and on the action side, on the execution side of it.
So if you're developing a AI system that needs to search knowledge and actually execute things on the user's behalf, it has to have some way of interfacing with those third-party platforms. And so whenever you connect a Chrome extension to your Google Chrome, it's creating that plugin or creating a bridge between something that you're currently using and something else. And agents similarly can use tools or functions to interface with different programs in order to extend their functionality or extend their reach into certain things. So if you were to make an agent that summarizes your email, if you were to ask it, hey, hello, how are you doing today? It certainly wouldn't need to search your email for that. It would just be able to respond normally to you. However, if it had the ability to search your email or the tool or the function to do, should you say, hey, summarize my emails for the past 24 hours, it could actually go and in real time speak to Gmail or Outlook or whatever your email provider is on your behalf and then get that real time data back. And so, whenever you pair those types of systems with an AI knowledge base, what you get is this supercharged chain or potential set of tasks that you can do. And the usability and value of those tasks increases exponentially with every new platform that you add. And so, having a modular system that you can extend to fit your exact needs without having to go through the arduous process of building all of those bridges out yourself, or even more in an extreme case, trying to build out those AI agents yourself and then connect all of those together, you can get that value almost like having an executive assistant. Once you've connected enough platforms, there is a large amount of tedious, just clicking type of stuff that you can get done now just by essentially speaking what you'd like to get done and then having the answers returned to you.
And so with that, I have always been envisioning these agents as not just being like the extension arm where it's, say, Zapier or something that is an automation platform where, say, I want to post something on Facebook. When I post something on Instagram, I want it to automatically take that content and share it on Facebook. This isn't that. It is part of that, but it's a little bit bigger because you can also, if I understand correctly, you can program sub agents as well, almost as if it's like a department of people with very specific functions, say a marketing expert in your company, somebody who's very good at marketing, but you as the CEO, you're saying, okay, we need to run a marketing campaign, and you tell your agent that. And then that manager agent will then communicate with people in finance, in marketing, in SEO, in social media management. And you can program all those sub agents to, when you give it an instruction, it disseminates it down to the sub agents, hands it all back up, and then uses that almost automation connection to execute those tasks. Is that about right?
Yeah. So there is a maximum threshold of the complexity that you can essentially put into an individual agent. And that's really not surprising whenever you compare how an agent works to how an employee works. Yeah, exactly what you said about comparing it to a department in an organization. The past year and a half or so, the idea of agents or large language models that can actually go out and do things became very popular. But you reach a level of complexity where you ask an agent to do this very long multi-step process, and just like a person, gets tripped up. It doesn't have the brains to execute everything by itself. And so, just a team or a department in a company has managers, and then you have team leads, and then you have people that are actually going out and doing a lot of the work. A lot of these agent systems, and Office Genie included, is doing something very similar. And so, if you have a Gmail agent or a Jira agent or a Confluence or Asana agent that are highly specialized in a series of tasks that are local to that particular platform, you can develop a very modular and dynamic agent system that can work as one entity from the end user's perspective, as in you don't have to say, okay, go to Jira and do this, then go and do that. It can understand and plan, and then, of course, disseminate and delegate those individual tasks out. But by leveraging multiple agents as compared to just one, you can get a lot more done a lot more reliably.
And see, when I make that thought comparison, I would think of it almost like building a house where you don't just tell the general contractor, hey, I want you to go out here and build my house. You may tell the contractor to do that, and he may know a lot about each one of the steps, but he's going to hire a carpenter, he's going to hire a framer, he's going to hire a flooring expert, an electrician, and all those people who are experts in that segment because you want the house built to the proper standards, to code, and you don't want the house to fall over because there's a jack of all trades and a master of none executing your task for you. They're almost having refined specialties, and you don't want them to be too broad, but have a little bit of an understanding of what whoever's doing something on the left or right of them, so that when they execute a task, they know how to hand it off in the right form. It's almost like the way I would envision it is like how the government works. They have forms and documents and all these standards of how they fill things out. And being in the military, this is if you want to be able to get paid for something, you'll have to fill out the proper form, submit it. And if it's not submitted perfectly, then they'll reject it. And having those checks and balances is very important, though, for standardization and organization, especially for accounting purposes for the government and the military and for businesses. But you, as the soldier or you, as the employee of a company, have to know at least how to hand off the information to standard. And so when it comes down to building out these bridges, and we're talking about the agentic functionality still here, when we talk about these agents, what do we do and why do we do it to make it more convenient for businesses so that all they really have to do is say, hey, I need this to work with this. We almost make it a little bit plug and play for them. And why do we do that? How do we do that? And why is that convenient for customers?
The reason that we do it is because the alternative is either not having those technologies ever implemented into your business, or what a lot of businesses are doing is going to third party consultants and having those systems built out for them. That's certainly a way to do it. But the issue is, again, the time to implementation is quite long. So, as things are changing or as a business's needs change, as the business grows, the system is very static. And so you introduce a level of complexity with now just interfacing with a third party, trying to build out a system that's right for you. And it becomes a lot more difficult to test something and again, just validate its value. And so what a plug and play system allows you to do is scroll through what would be most similar to an app store on your phone or the Google Play Store, and just selecting the technologies that you already use. And the moment that you add those to Office Genie, all of the functionalities therein are immediately applied to you. You brought up the analogy of the military, and I think that's absolutely representative of how Office Genie is able to effectively delegate and execute on those multi step, very complex questions you might have for it, or tasks you might have for it, rather. And it really just leverages the idea of multi layer abstraction. So, what I mean by that is if you were to imagine a mission planning event going on for a military operation, as things move down the chain of command, asking gets a bit more granular until it hits the individual person. And although you need to have a general understanding of what people are doing above you and the larger kind of mission at hand, you should really just be focused on a particular task. And by reducing the degrees of freedom of individual agents, we've been able to see that the reliability and the robustness of the system increases quite drastically. Additionally, if you have these compartments, these modules or agent groupings that are associated with an individual platform, again, you're able to have it be very plug and play to where you only use what's actually relevant to your system. You don't have this massive network of agents where you're only using a Jira agent, for example, and the other 99 aren't really applicable to you. And so by sequestering an agent's view or field of view to one particular domain, we're able to really get a lot of value out of that and make sure that everyone is just focused on their individual tasks. If you're a manager and you're trying to manage four teams at once, all that context switching, things slip through the cracks and agents are no different. They're not they're still vulnerable to the same kind of slip ups that a person trying to plan out all that stuff is. And so by keeping things very granular and very focused, we're able to make sure that the system is modular, extendable, but most importantly, reliable.
And that's where we jump into scalability of this technology and why it's important for businesses. Because when we're talking about the military, we're talking about a massive organization. And a lot of people hearing that will probably assume that this technology is designed for these massive firms or these massive government agencies. But one of the things you touched on was the fact that as your business grows and changes over time, some sort of software that you're currently using may not meet the demands or needs for what you're doing. For example, a company that's using QuickBooks that winds up a Fortune 500 company might want to switch to some sort of accounting software. And when we're talking about our technology, we are targeting smaller businesses in our company or our technology. As you build out more functionality, more capabilities with the systems will actually grow with your company. And even if you were to say jump to another software, we have some flexibility to be able to grow with your business. And the amazing part about the technology is because of these databases and the more information you put into them, the more they learn from you and improve. And it just scales from, even we're talking like the sole entrepreneur, even students who are going through college right now can benefit from this type of technology, uploading entire books, asking really specific questions about the books and getting the answers, all the way up to a company that has, what do you think? What do you think the largest company is that could handle this? And what do you think the smallest size individual can use this for? And how does that scale with them?
Yeah, so I think it's just a question of if you were to assess your day or maybe your week, what are your most common processes? And how could AI potentially help you with that? Or take AI out of the equation. If you had an executive assistant and they had five taskings, this is their job role, what would that be? So you gave the example of a student. So ideally, an assistant for a university student would be able to look at all of my notes, look at all of my syllabi, I guess that's the plural of syllabus, for all of my classes and make sure that I'm not missing any quizzes and help me review for my notes. Another thing they should probably be able to do is to get onto Canvas and make sure that I am up to date on all of my grades and that if any announcements are coming in, I can go ahead and see those. And you just go down this list of logical, just, okay, I'm really only interfacing with about four or five platforms here. And so if there was a system that could handle all of my personal information and interface with those four or five systems, I would probably be a highly effective person compared to where I was a week ago. And again, the stark contrast between not having a modular system and having a modular system is in the example where you don't have one. Now you have to go through building all of that stuff out yourself. And that's very expensive on your wallet and on your time. And a lot of people can't really afford that price of lack of productivity while they're building it. By having a very extensible kind of modular system, they're able to see the benefit without having to wait the 6 months, without having to pay the pretty daunting upfront cost for implementation there. But going on the other extreme end, a Fortune 500 company isn't very dissimilar to OfficeGenie's multi-agent system. Each particular person or kind of each area of the organization, they're only if it's a well-organized organization, which I'd imagine if you're a Fortune 500 company, you're probably pretty well organized. But each person's only doing a few things. So if you have a software engineer, they need to be able to interface with wherever they're writing their code, be able to manage with adjacent teams to make sure they're meeting their project requirements, and planning with other developers. If you're HR, you have a very specific subset of tasks. And so again, all of the individuals within that organization just like the student did, can go through and say, okay, what information do I need to put into a system that would be able to help me? What 4 or 5 platforms do I commonly interface with? And Office Genie for businesses or for teams works as a subset of all of those platforms. So not every individual person is going to need every individual platform. But if you have all of them available to you and you can simply just click and apply all of the ones that you as an individual would need, then extrapolating that out to the entire organization, just like we saw with the student example earlier, now everyone is twice as productive and it's all localized to their specific job roles.
And see, that's where I love the word that you said about this when we first started talking about this was it is a workforce multiplier. And that is probably the most powerful way to explain Office Genie. And when we come into that, and as we refine the product more and improve upon every single feature and function of it, we start getting into what happens to the data. Say, for example, from the individual using it for themselves, maybe they're using it for, let's just say, tracking their child's medical history, or an individual student using it for their classes, all the way to a company that's putting all of their sensitive information onto a server. And they're having to not just trust us, they're having to trust any company with their data. But what do we do differently with their data? How does it function in regards to the sensitivity and security of their information when using this type of a system?
So if you're uploading domain specific information and trying to use it to improve the performance of a large language model, there's really 2 routes that you can take. The first is fine tuning, which is using all of those training data chunks or those documents as examples of given this input, you should do this type of output. This isn't actually adding anything to the model implicit knowledge. It's just a way to format responses in a more defined structure. So, for business applications looking for knowledge based type stuff or retrieval augmented generation, fine tuning isn't really a good path forward. So, in stark contrast to that, retrieval augmented generation, whenever you're storing that information, it's not ever going into the model's training data. It's never being used to train on it because, quite frankly, that just wouldn't really make sense in context of the system. You wouldn't really need to train on it because it's seeing it at the same time that the user is asking the question. And because these models are stateless, meaning that barring any kind of conversational memory within a current tab on ChatGPT, for example, these large language models aren't really carrying over any information from previous chats. And so, what we're able to do is effectively segment the uploaded documentation from the large language model. And so long as we can keep kind of good data governance on the actual place or the databases where the original uploaded documents are, and ensure that the large language model provider or whatever kind of assortment of models we're using is taking good care of the data as well. But there's no actual data persistence other than the location of the originally uploaded files. So I know that a lot of AI startups or AI companies have varying levels of security or affordances that they can provide for their users. But Office Genie, full stop, does not train on any uploaded information because A, we just don't do that. And if you don't trust us, it really doesn't make sense to do it logically from a business perspective. And so we feel like we're pretty well postured from a security standpoint. But just also logically speaking, we get that it's a little difficult to maybe put full trust in companies that have AI in the name. You might think Skynet, for example. But just from a business perspective, it doesn't make sense to be training on any of that data because that's not really where it's most effective. If we were to do something like fine tuning, Office Genie's performance would take a massive decline. It would be super expensive to use, quite frankly. And of course, that's not good data security practice.
So are we separating companies' information? Say if there's two competitors that are very similar to one another, are we ever going to store them on the same server? Or is it going to be separated on different instances?
So all of the data is separated out by business and then at a user level as well. And so whenever you send in a query to Office Genie, the first thing it does is understands the business that the user is associated with. And so immediately from the full available expanse of information where Office Genie can get that relevant context, it's immediately refining it down to just the business circle. And then with role based access control features that we've implemented on platform, you can then go and get even more granular control down to a folder and document level. So, the example I usually give for this is if you have an admin that wants to see the financial reports for a company in the past 3 months, you probably don't want that information to be available to an intern that you just hired. And so, even though that's within the same kind of business information pool that's specific to that particular company, different users can access a different subset of even that information. And so, it's very logically compartmentalized. And of course, those granular user access checks really make it easy to separate data and make sure that the visibility is well controlled, maintained. And we always try to operate on the principle of least privilege. So if it doesn't really make sense for a user to be able to even ask questions about something and get the answer for it, then of course that's certainly a possibility for the user, for the business admins to be able and go in and control that access.
It reminds me of the military. It's like you always see in the movies how someone's, oh, I got top secret security clearance. And they're like, I can learn about XYZ of whatever operation. It's actually on a need to know basis in the military. If it's not your job to know about it, you will not know about it. And that's how role based access control on our level works. Now, when it comes down to that type of filtering system, we can touch a little bit more on our actual analytics, on the things that we do track. Let's talk about how analytics plays a role for their businesses, how it works now, and how we can actually assist businesses with tracking certain types of information that's relevant to them, but it's a useful tool for them to be able to improve and iterate on either processes or procedures or where they would like to go so that they can see the performance of what types of questions people are asking into these chatbots. Unlike ChatGPT, where you may implement it across your whole business, you got everybody asking the same question, like, hey, where do I find this information? But you'll never know what you need to train your employees on. It's that one procedure in the company that everyone's having issues with and keeps mentioning to the boss, but the boss forgets. So, can you explain a little bit more about how the analytics and tracking processes work and how companies can use that?
So this is definitely applicable to business applications of Office Genie, but as a large organization, medium-sized organization, or even a small business, if you're the CEO and you're looking to implement a platform like Office Genie or any AI related platform, I'm sure you've experienced something where you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at kind of summary statistics of your business, and it becomes very difficult to assess or understand how you can make optimizations in your business because, quite frankly, you're not on the ground level doing all of the day in, day out stuff that your teams are. And through that chain of command, as things rise, they get more and more kind of fuzzy until eventually you're just left with an individual kind of productivity score that now you have to do that root cause analysis to figure out where those issues are occurring. But how Office Genie combats this is by kind of information flag and knowledge gap tracking. So, what I mean by that is if you are a user of Office Genie and you're asking a question related to, let's just say, how to handle a return that's over $250, who do I need to speak to? If Office Genie searches your business knowledge base and can't find an answer for it, it won't hallucinate an answer and it won't just say, I have no idea. It will mark it as a knowledge gap and then return it to the admins of the Office Genie workspace, such that they now have delivered to them on a silver platter all of the questions within their business that are going unanswered. A knowledge gap is just one type of flag that we offer. Another good example is conflicting context. So if you were to upload a document that's labeled like, I don't know, training manual 2022, and you were to upload another document that's training manual 2024, by nature of how Office Genie's system works, if you ask something that's a question that whose answer would be contained in a training manual, Office Genie's probably going to say, hey, these two documents are very relevant to that. However, if in the 2022 document, the process has changed and the 2024 document says something completely different, it's not just going to arbitrarily choose one or the other. It's going to again deliver that information to the administrators of the system saying, hey, you have conflicting information. One of these needs to be changed or one of them needs to be deleted. And so by circumventing the process of ideas or potential bottlenecks and workflows and processes as things move up, by circumventing that and still delivering that high fidelity information directly to the people that are overseeing those teams, departments, or even entire businesses, you're able to get a really good look into where things are going right in your business and potentially where things can be improved.
And it's interesting that you went into that specific scenario because that comes into play when it comes to structuring your knowledge base. Because by traditional standards, we're talking about folders within folders within folders of trying to find that training manual for 2024. And then you have to have somebody go in there like a lawyer and look at every single line by line to make sure that it's one, accurate, two, not some sort of typo that you could get tripped up on in some sort of legal dispute, something minuscule. And that's where accuracy comes into play. We talked about how there's contextual relevance in our systems, but how do admins keep control and organize their information inside of Office Genie?
There's a high degree of flexibility in how you structure and organize the information in your system. It's a complete paradigm shift from the kind of legacy way of organizing things where you would need a folder within a folder within a folder, and then 5 documents that basically have the same name. And then you have to go digging to find which one has the last edited date. So, again, because we're able to represent the text of these documents semantically and then search through them on their contextual relevance, we kind of skip past the need to do all of those super crazy embedded folders. So we do provide a level of separation to where just for visual organization, admins can go in and create folders, and then of course add documents to those folders, and then provision and or revoke access at the user level to those folders to again regulate information visibility throughout the system. The good news is, and this might seem a bit counterintuitive, for the most part, you can just throw stuff into Office Genie. It'll organize it on its own end and then just deliver the information. There isn't the need for massive amounts of planning and organization as to how you're going to be exactly structuring your folders. Because again, how that data is encoded handles all of that organization for you. And although you're not seeing those embedded folders within folders, Office Genie is still able to find that needle in the haystack just as quick.
That's amazing. And that's where, when it comes down to the searchability of information and the uploadability of information, we talked a little bit about documents, but everybody always assumes large language models are just like, we're talking like pieces of paper with text on. What type of data can actually go into this system and what cannot? And what are we looking to implement here in the future that would be able to meet the needs of people in the future?
Mhm. So the idea of Office Genie originally was for it to be an AI knowledge base that allows for businesses to upload their existing internal documentation. Internal documentation is a very vague, broad topic that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different companies. Of course, a logical starting place was text documents like PDFs or Word documents, but we got a lot of feedback from potential customers and beta testers saying that I'd really like to be able to upload Excel documents. Now, structured data or stuff that neatly fits in rows and columns has been a nightmare for large language models for quite some time, simply because we see the rows and the columns. But the way that a large language model works is it's not able to understand the structure of information in a similar way. And so over time, we were able to develop a module or kind of a compartment of Office Genie that can analyze that more structured data. And so now we're able to support CSV files, Excel files, or any other structured data source you'd have. In addition to that, a lot of the times your most tenured or experienced employees know a lot of stuff, but they don't have any of it written down. And so we thought one day, and I think this was actually you that suggested this, wouldn't it be cool if you could just upload an audio file that was like an hour-long conversation before, let's say, your top employee were to retire, and you just ask them, how do you do your job? Walk me through your day. Tell me all the things you do to make yourself the most productive employee in this team. And as a result, we implemented a feature such that users can actually just upload audio files, whether that be an MP3 file, a WAV file, or any audio file format you'd like to be able to. The other kind of upload format that we've implemented since Office Genie's inception is images. So if you have a flow chart doing something with optical character recognition, for example, which is the, up until recently at least, the industry standard way of getting information from an image, would just pull all of the text characters from the image. But the big issue with that is if you use the example of a flowchart, just the text of a flowchart doesn't really mean anything because it's the arrows and the way in which everything is structured that really gives it meaning. And so whenever you upload images or flowcharts or diagrams to OfficeGenie, it converts all of that implicit meaning into text that it can then understand and store and save. And so you're actually able to edit the quote unquote logic of a flowchart after you've already uploaded it because it's converted it into that textual representation. We're working on implementing more ways to upload information to OfficeGenie. Eventually, we'd like to expand our horizons into video. And that's something we're actively working on as well. But again, just with the high level goal of whatever your business has, throw it into OfficeGenie and it'll just work.
As time goes on, as this product improves, because I know the amount of time that we've spent on it, especially you and Zane programming this day in, day out. How long has it been now? What, a year? About a
Yeah, it's been roughly a year like to the day.
And
Yeah.
that's where when we start talking to customers and they're like, wow, this is really cool. I really need something like this. I've actually talked to customers about this where I'm like, yeah, it's a fantastic thing to implement. We're happy to do any type of consulting for you to help you get to where you want to be. But we've already taken a lot of the legwork out of it, a lot of the cost associated with developing this product. And so let's talk a little bit about pricing. We have set our pricing up at $25 per month per user for
Mhm.
just the business level stuff. And we talk about on our website the exact things that are included in that, as well as enterprise solutions. But I think recently you had mentioned that we're going to be implementing an individual plan. I'm not sure the exact pricing on that. You may be able to answer this better, but I believe it's $20 a month.
Correct.
So we're going to be having individual plans that are useful for students, sole proprietors, even just say, for example, if you're a small business owner, like a micro business that has like maybe 10 employees and you're just wanting to use it as the boss. And yeah, you can definitely do that type of a thing on an individual plan. The business plans, I would say, is probably more suited towards people who have sub managers below them. And then enterprise, of course, are companies that are going to have 100 employees or more. But if people are wanting questions answered about artificial intelligence in general, implementation, things like that, we actually have a consulting branch of our company, Genie Consulting, which we can help you with that. I myself, being on the production side of the world, I help a lot with the actual vision models, technological implementations. But with Hayden's expertise working and programming these things from the grassroots, we can give you a realistic perspective of what it will take to implement something like this from the ground up. But if you're just wanting to have something more plug and play, that's where Office Genie is the most useful. Now, when it comes down to launch or usability of the software right now, where can people access the information, contact you, and just learn more about our company in general?
Obviously, our social media would be a great place to go and learn. We're going to be continuing to document a lot of stuff regarding our process, features, and just Office Genie behind the veil, who we are, and the process of building and starting this company from the ground up. If anyone wants to reach out to me, of course, they're free to message me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to respond to people there if they just have any individual questions, or, of course, sending an email to any of the people at Office Genie or just a support email should they have any questions there. But really quick, just what you had mentioned regarding the consulting work. This is tying back into the whole multi agent system or having that modular system. But should a company need, and we've seen this time and time again, a majority of what the company is needing is plug and play platform stuff. However, if a business has any on prem databases or anything that's more local or specific to them, if they're also needing stuff there, again, with that modular system, we're able to specifically develop and implement that particular module. So, a good example is Emergence Teleradiology, who's going to be using Office Genie for their AI knowledge base, connecting to the platforms that they currently use. But as a radiology clinic, they have a lot of reporting needs that needs to be taken care of at, generally speaking, regular intervals. And so, what we're able to provide for them is a container specialized for their business that can then go and execute those business specific needs accessible through that standard Office Genie interface. And so, should the business that we're talking to, or even at an individual level, if they're interested in Office Genie, we can build out those custom integrations. And again, a significant reduction in price and time to implement, simply because, as you said, a majority of the legwork has already been done. Everything that can be plug and play will be plug and play, and we can take care of the rest.
This is one of many episodes that we're going to be launching. So if you have questions about the technology, you can drop it in the comments section, reach out to us directly. Again, my name is Aaron Monson, and this is Hayden Smith. We wanted to thank you for making it here to the end of this video, and just let us know what you need. Take care.